I see Breek or Kim just came on.
All right, so we're good. It's recording.
Yeah, we're good. Go ahead.
Okay, Alec, do you want to start off? Say who you are.
Sure. Thanks, everybody. My name is Alex Dupy. I'm with MIG and consultant project manager for this project.
Darren?
All right, Darren Wise, planning manager, City West Linn, managing the House Bill 2001 project.
The other Darren?
Darren Gusdorf with Icon Construction.
Charlie?
Charlie Matthews, member of the Planning Commission.
Ken?
Did you say Kim or Ken?
Kim?
Thank you. Hello, Kim Bria, Sustainability Advisory Board.
Scott?
Hi, Scott Irwin, a member of the City Planning Commission, as well as the Historic Review Board.
Shannon with an E.
Shannon Knight, I'm here representing CDC and CCI.
Now Shannon with an O.
Shannon Eilis, I'm here representing the EDC as well as the Westland Alliance.
Vicky?
Vicki Olson, Committee for Citizen Involvement.
Tom?
Tom Watton, Historical Review Board.
Jim Farrell. I am the citizen at large. Okay, so Darren, you want to go ahead and start off with what, again, for our role as a working group, we have to do this each time, apparently.
Yes, thanks, Jim. Yeah, so I just want to always remind folks what the role of the working group is, and also the purpose of the working group. So let me scroll down to it here. So the goal was the 2022 working group will recommend a code amendment package for each of the three projects: House Bill 2001, which you're going to make a decision on today, clear and objective standards for housing in Chapter 96. And again, the purpose being the same with House Bill 2001 going first, Chapter 96 second, and clear and objective standards third. So the meeting guidelines. A reminder that the goal of the group is to try to find consensus. So hopefully today we can find that consensus. If not, the meeting guidelines point to going to a vote of the members. So again, there's a few members missing, so the alternates would take their vote in this case. As I mentioned previously, Vicky for Dan, Mary if she gets on for Rory, and I believe those are the two alternates that would step in. And that's it for that agenda item. Thanks, Jim.
Okay, and meeting guidelines. That's about it for FK. How about the review then, Darren, for that?
All right, so the first component will be the summary notes. So the summary notes were provided in your meeting packet beginning on page 10. So I'll let the group either make a motion or have any amendments to or edits to the meeting summary.
Everybody agree with them, or do we want to make a motion? Anybody have anything to add? Well, hearing none. Charlie?
I move we accept the minutes.
Second.
Okay, let's go ahead and everybody just raise a hand or put your hand up, however you want to do it. And Greg, I see you just showed up. Would you like to say who you are and who you represent? What happened to Greg?
Oh, right here, sorry. Yeah, Greg DiLaurado representing the Transportation Advisory Board. Sorry I'm late. I'm beautiful Kauai, Hawaii, so I appreciate my devotion to the cause here.
I do appreciate your commitment, Greg.
Okay, so we have passed that. So you want to do a discussion of the recap, Darren?
Yes, so again, in your meeting packet under the memo, I provided a very short recap, but I just wanted to remind everyone that a number of updates were made to the code amendment package based on comments from the between the second and third meetings. We rolled back some of the language to get to the de minimis code requirements of House Bill 2001. The working group at the last meeting number 3, discussed going beyond the de minimis package on a couple of items. One being some members' proposals to increase the FAR for middle housing types in some different zones, and also to allow an increase in lot coverage for middle housing types in certain zones. So that was the main component of the discussion at the last meeting. 3 options were presented to the group based on comments sent in by Shannon, Scott, and JJ. Those were presented to the group. There was no consensus found on where the group wanted to land. So the outcome of the last meeting was staff and the consultant team would provide you with 3 distinct options, which then you can try to find consensus on at this meeting or go to a vote if necessary. So again, those 3 options are provided in a table on page 17 for plexes of your packet. And there's a table for townhomes on page 18. So again, the goal will be to work through those 2 tables at this meeting, do our best to find consensus, and if not, then go with the vote at the end.
With that, it's probably Alex's turn.
All right. Well, with that, thank you, Darren. And Darren, would you mind pulling up those tables? We could start to talk through that. And so our goal today is to, hopefully come to consensus on one of these options. I think it's okay if we don't, but an outcome of this meeting is that we do want to be able to provide Planning Commission direction for, at least at various levels where where the group stands on implementing HB 2001. And so I think maybe a good place to start with this is that there was, as Darren mentioned, a fair bit of conversation last time about, de minimis versus doing something a little bit more, whether that's additional lot coverage or site coverage or FAR requirements. And I know, Darren, there was some additional comments provided related to that. And so, Darren, I think it makes sense maybe to bring up the table now so we can show some of those differences. And I think I'd like, before we get into potential how we move forward, is just to have a conversation where each person stands on these various elements, and then we could talk about if there are any needs for changes that would bring you to a certain decision, or if we really are, looking at providing multiple options to planning commission. I think maybe we could start, and I know, Charlie, you had discussed, I believe, at the last meeting, really focusing on the de minimis path towards, for planning commission. And I'm wondering, would you mind kind of kicking us off talking about your perspective on that, and if there's others that really want to think about it, it really is just implementing the minimum amount to make sure we're consistent with HB 2001, but we just go with that minimum decision. So Charlie, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off with that, we could have a bit of discussion about that, and then we can move into the other options as well too.
Sure. I mean, it's, I don't know that I'll come off of this position later in the evening, but I could. But I think that the changes that are recommended, particularly in the floor area ratio concept, there's a reason to have that in the code. I think and I went through probably half a dozen impacts, I think, and they were stated very nicely. Thank you in your summation of the last meeting. And I think they're relevant. I think that the thing with me is that not having the changes, but having them impact on infill. And if that's, I really have concerns with people who've moved here and had every expectation that the empty lot between their house and the house next door would eventually contain a house basically similar to theirs. And I'm not I'm not happy with the concept that that isn't going to be the case. I did have a question though. If we, in changing the FAR requirements, it would impact a single family unit in those zones where the changes recommended, not simply multifamily units, but it would. So is there any way to kind of cut this thing in half and say that for a single family unit, the FAR wouldn't change, but the FAR would change for multi units in on the same piece of property?
So yeah, I can answer that, Alex. So that's what's being proposed, Charlie, is that the FAR would not change for single family detached home. It would the increase would only apply to middle housing types.
I must have missed that. I'm sorry. I didn't notice that. I think that's relevant, I believe. So anyway, that's me kicking it off. I think, and also with the de minimis, it'll give city council and it'll give the people in the community opportunities to hear people that are running for office take a position on this and make their selections based on that as well. So,
Charlie, I appreciate that, and thank you for
okay,
being in the hot seat right at the beginning. One question for you is, with that change, and we had discussed this at the previous meeting when the FAR, Darren, correct me if I'm wrong, but we had looked more at like almost blanket changes for FAR, whereas this FAR change in this revised piece is really just about the middle housing concepts. So if that, does that change, Charlie, your kind of thoughts on the de minimis? Like if we were to maintain the single family home, but adjust it to be more flexible for middle housing, does that change your equation at all or change your thought process about that?
oh, no, let's wait till the end of the meeting.
Right.
There are other issues, and again, that doesn't get past the infill problem that are a concern that I have on existing neighborhoods and the impact that this would have to what expectations people had and should have had and aren't going to be met now if when this goes through.
Great, thank you, appreciate that. Other comments about the de minimis, and if people have a strong feeling or sense for that particular approach, is there other things we should consider in the discussion about that approach when we start to look at support or lack of support for that? Greg, you're rested in Maui. You've had, I'm sure, plenty of time to think about it on the beach. Any
Yeah, it's been topmost on my mind. And I don't really. I mean, I thought about it last time we had that conversation. I talked with Darren and JJ regarding why have it at all. But it's not an issue that I'm gonna make or break for me. I mean, it's not. I get what JJ was saying, and I get the fact that we probably need to build a little bigger middle housing in order to make it financially work and to fit in really with West Linn. But compromise you came up with was it would stay the same in 10 single family, what is it, 10, R10, whatever the other one was, and it would get a little bit more lenient, if you will, in the smaller zones, if I got it right. And so, that probably could work.
Okay. Thank you, Greg. I appreciate that. Shannon, with an E, you had your hand up. Oh, you're on mute.
Mute's off.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so here's my whole thing. What I hate about HB 2001 is that the state is dictating how we should zone our city without knowing anything about our city. And zoning has always kind of existed for the reason. You have more dense zones near public transportation or on highly traveled roads that are designed to handle higher traffic flows. And that's why I see the R2.1, R3, R4, et cetera, all that are already designed to be dense, increasing density. You're not really increasing density in those zones if you increase the FAR for them, because they're already designed to be super dense zones. So that's why it makes sense to put, remove the FAR for those so that you can build, normal size housing that would be in demand here. But I'm really against the idea that we heard last time about, trying to put share the burden and try to force it into the larger the R15 and the R20s, because those are the places that were designed to be less dense. So the infrastructure and the roads and stuff might not be capable of handling that kind of density. And those are the people that live in large lots, and we're not expecting to have a bunch of infill next to them, versus those that live in those high dense zones are expecting the infill because that's how the neighborhoods are already built out that way. So that's why my suggestion of getting rid of the FAR in the high density zones, to encourage density in those areas that are already designed to be dense, that we already zoned them to be dense, makes the most sense. Because if you look at that chart, Darren provided, the FAR at the current level still allows decent sized units to be built in those R15, R20, even R10 zones. So I didn't see a need to increase them at all there. You could still get like 1,100 square foot house, or unit, which is, a size of the small houses here in like the historic district or something like that. So that's a reasonable size unit. It doesn't need to be increased, but it makes sense to increase the FAR in the denser zones, so that are 2.1, stuff like that. I'm open to increasing the FAR to like the 0.60 in the R5, 7, and 10 zones, but I feel like that size is not as significant, or the change in square footage is not that as significant. But those are the R10 zone. Yeah, we saw that like 70% of the town is this R10, and those are the areas that I think people are the most worried about seeing that density come in, and that's why I think not increasing the FAR in the R10 would make sense. The R5 is where, I kind of go both ways on. I think that those are a little more denser, but again, people not expecting to be super dense. So I could go either way on that. But I think.
Great, thank you. So it sounds like, FAR flexibility in higher density zones, less so in the lower density areas. Scott, you had your hand up.
Great, thanks.
See the pattern a little bit. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think Shannon hit on some nuances there, and I think one thing that we should do is make sure that we're staying centered with where most of the land is. 82% of the land in Westland is R5, R7, R10, overwhelmingly R10. When you look at the percentage of lots, 59% R10, 11.4% R7, and 7% R5. So over 3/4 of the lots by number are in this group of R5 through R10. And looking at option 2, where we present a across the board increase of up to 60% for the FAR for all plexes in all those lot sizes, that makes it so the square footage is able to get to a size for family homes. I think we can all agree that families can be raised in homes in the 1,500 up to 3,000 square foot range. We're not increasing lot coverage. We're not pinching the setbacks. So I think this is a great way to make sure that we're able to create more family housing, more housing for empty nesters, without damaging the existing appeal of West Linn. So I hope you all can jump on board with a very clear option 2 as your primary choice of the 3. Thank you.
Darren, would it be possible to pull that up on screen, the table, so we can see the options?
Yeah, I can. I actually was going to explain the tables to everyone before this conversation started, but it's fine. We'll just go with it. Let's see, share.
Let's jump. Any other comments for this, and we can go. We can come back into those if there are other specific questions. It sounds like there's Scott, you're very supportive of the option 2. Kind of looking at that, it sounds like there's some other discussion points around where, like potentially some flexibility for FAR, but the question of where is a question, and of whether or not that's just for single family or middle housing. So with that, Darren, maybe this is actually a good time to look through, show what you have here. Talk through that.
Thanks. So yeah, I actually want to go back to the previous table. It's on page 16 of your packet. And this just literally shows the existing conditions in our code right now. So for the R10, R7, R5, R4.5, R3, and R2.1. And as Shannon had mentioned, we're not proposing any changes to the R15, R20, or R40 zones, just to these zones here. So it shows the minimum lot size and the setbacks required, which that gets you to the total buildable area of the lot, right? Total size of the lot minus setbacks. But then we put in the artificial max lot coverage number of either 35%, 40%, or 50%, depending on the zone. And as you can see, then that really then ratchets down how much of the larger lots can actually be built upon. And then once you get down to like the R5 and R4.5, you're going from a total buildable area of about 2,400 square feet to 2,000 square feet with that lot coverage maximum in there. So it's something to consider when you're thinking about, you're talking about an extra 400 square feet or 300 square feet of the lot being built upon with that lot coverage, if you remove that lot coverage. And then, of course, then the max FAR. So that's existing conditions. And then going to the options for plexes. Again, we provided, as the group asked, we provided option 1, which is the de minimis package, showing on the far right of the table, the last 3 columns, what that would mean for the max unit size of a duplex, a triplex, and a quadplex. And then we went to what we call the moderate option, option 2, which was just doing a 60% increase across the board for all of those zones. And again, the last 3 columns showing what the size of a structure, a dwelling unit could be for each of the 3 plex types. And then again, the option 3 was the option to just remove FAR altogether. So the intent was to show like the increases in how much more livable space you could get out of each plex type as you moved along the spectrum of higher FAR allowances. So I will say that in R5, in the higher zones, I did have in here just removing the lot coverage, but in the R5 and R4.5 and those 2 zones, it does not impact the FAR calculations. Those would still remain the same based on the 60%. The only place that would really change anything would be the R2.1 and R3 zones. As you can see, I'm sorry, I have that backwards. The R3 and R2.1 zones, the existing max lot coverage of 50% is actually more than what could actually be developed based on the setbacks. And I hope I'm explaining that well enough. So if you look at the existing max lot coverage for the R3 zone, it says it allows up to 50% lot coverage, but that's actually not even allowed because based on the setbacks, only 1,200 square feet of the lot could actually be developed. So again, that's what we've proposed here. And again, that's something for the group to discuss. And the impact would be in the R5 and R4.5. If you remove lot coverage, it would just allow you to build a bigger structure if it was with option 3. With option 2, you're only increasing the size of the structure based on the FAR alone, not the lot coverage maximum. And I hope that makes sense, because it makes sense in my mind, because I've been dealing with this so in-depthly. But anyhow, the point being, there's the 3 options you asked for, showing what the FAR would be with those slight increase and then the elimination of the FAR. And then
go ahead, Darren, sorry.
Oh, and I was going to say, and then I added an additional table on page 18 where I pulled out townhomes out of this equation, because townhomes are sort of their own animal, because they're all going to be on smaller lot sizes, probably 1,500 to 2,500 square foot lot sizes. And again, I've put in here the existing max lot coverages of 35% in certain zones, 40% in certain zones, and 50% in certain zones. And then if you just eliminated the max lot coverage, how much of the lot you could actually cover based on setbacks once again. And then I also provided the max FAR size with 45%, which is across the board, and then provided options for increasing that with incremental increases, showing how much larger the actual dwelling unit could get. So for instance, on the 1,500 square foot townhome, which is the first row, if you kept the existing max FAR, you could only build a 675 square foot townhome. But if you put that up to a moderate or a little more moderate level of 80%, you could build a 1,200 square foot townhome. So that's another decision I think the group needs to come to also, is 2 separate decisions, one on plexes, the other on townhomes. And so those were the 3 tables provided, and then Scott hit on the other information I provided about the acreage in each different zone, the number of lots in each different zone, and then the overall size of lots in the city of West Linn. So the second table on this page here, I hope everybody can see it, shows that roughly 80% of the lots within the city of West Linn are 7,000 square feet or larger. So that's where probably we're going to see most of the use of this House Bill 2001. And with that, I'll stop and again, sorry if I was confusing about these tables, but I'm willing to answer questions, or Alex, if you want to continue on with your presentation.
Let's take some questions, and just for the team. So Darren, you're asking us to answer 2 questions or provide direction on 2 pieces. So townhomes specifically, and then also duplex, triplex, quads, etc. So there's 2. You're asking for 2 decision points tonight.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So let's open it up. So Darren, thanks for that. Are there questions for Darren? Clarifications, anything like that, as we start to get into thinking about which option or options we would want to recommend to move forward to Planning Commission for discussion. And we can also have a third option of if we wanted to combine, like Shannon, to your point about maybe FAR should just be in the higher density zones, or so is there a recommendation that we would want to consider that somebody else would want to bring up?
I have a question. This is Vicky.
Hi, Vicky. Sure.
On the chart that's on page 20, it says R-10 total lots, 6,000. There are 6,000 lots. I mean, that's the total lots that we have in that category available?
That's correct, Vicky. This was a data that was put together by DLCD, looking at all of the residential zoning districts in each city in the state of Oregon. In West Linn, yeah, there are just over 6,000 lots that are zoned R10.
Okay.
Yep. And then which is roughly 60% of the city. But if you go up to the table previously, it was done by acreage. And so R10, it's about 60% of the lots, but about 71% of the acreage. So
Okay.
yeah, that's just showing that R10, as Scott said, R10, R7, and R5 really dominate the residential zoning districts in the city of West Linn. Like R40, there's one lot zoned R40, so it's like there's going to be no impact on R40 if we don't change anything.
Other questions or?
Yeah, I had just a couple of questions, making sure I'm understanding this. Most of the R10 lots, single family homes, the ones that are built upon right now?
That's correct. Single family detached homes, yeah.
Okay. Because I see Shannonite's concern, and I have heard this when I talk to people in the community, that the last thing they want is for someone to buy the house next to them, raise it, and then put 3 townhomes on there. That is not compatible with the expectations of the neighborhood. But I realize there's also a need for more housing, and the bulk of the housing is in lots or in R10. But I feel more comfortable keeping the FAR where those are. And if I understand correctly, what you're basically asking about is if you build a larger space, there will be less land or no land for a backyard or anything like that, right?
So from a lot coverage standpoint, yes, that would affect the size of the footprint. From an FAR standpoint, that's really more about the bulk of a building.
Okay.
So I do want to clarify though, with HB 2001, the middle housing requirements within all single family zones, duplex, triplex, quads, and cottage clusters would still be allowed within all zones. The question in front of us today, I think, is specifically revolving around bulk and mass, essentially for those spaces. So it's the FAR and the site design, and I think that these 3 options are kind of strings along that line of questioning of how we want to address that and what direction we would want to provide planning commission to ultimately make a decision. So again, the question is, the de minimis aspect of do only what HB 2001 is requiring, which would be to update the code to allow these types of uses in a manner that is not more difficult to develop than a single family home within the zone. In general, that's what de minimis would be. The other 2 questions that we have in front of us, actually, I guess it's 2.5 questions. The other 2.5 questions we have is, how should we do that within these zones? That's where there's some flexibility that we're wrestling with here within this group, particularly with FAR and site coverage. The half question that Darren wants us to answer is also around townhomes. And so that is also addressed in that site coverage piece. The townhomes are also incorporated into the middle housing discussion. So that's also something that we're wrestling with in terms of that site design. Does that make sense? I just want to make sure we're clear in our decision making, that we're not making a decision about whether or not middle housing is happening in single family zones. The question is really about the design of those pieces and how they might fit within each of the zones that we have in front of us. With that, other questions or comments, concerns?
Yeah. Alex, Jim.
Jim, please.
Well, looking at it, first of all, the history of West Linn is, we didn't really start getting the housing and whatnot that we have now until the latter part of the 70s and into the 80s, and into the 2000s. And all the people that lived there before, they had to go through all the changes from being a mill town where you pretty much did what you wanted to do. And, what we're faced with now is a situation where we have to allow middle housing in all zones. And it's just, how does that going to look next door to us?
Mhm.
As JJ stated out, think about a duplex. Just put two doors onto the house next door to you.
Mhm.
And in looking at these, when you're looking under the groupings of the lower R's, and you start putting these houses on there of the townhouses, the quads, the duplexes, and whatnot, I don't know very many people that are going to want to live in a 400 or a 500 or a 600 or a 700 square foot house. It just doesn't add out. And, I would personally be, in favor of removing the FARs for those as kind of like an option too, so that they can have at least 900 square feet into a townhouse and whatnot. All you have to do is go look at the townhouses that were built in 2001 down there along off of Salamo. I mean, the parking sucks. The houses were cheaply built. The and you kind of put all of that into one area. And if we go ahead and start putting, like some people want to put all this down along Highway 43 or someplace like that, that brings out a whole new issue of problems, of having one group of people living in one part of the city. You have the elites living up in another section of the city. There's no diversity within our city limits. And it's going to create problems. When you have a townhouse next door to you, and even if you have into the HOAs that it's required that at least are a duplex or a triplex, that one of the units has to be owner occupied instead of rented out, you're going to have people interested in the property. They're going to be keeping that property up. That property is going to look halfway decent. Otherwise, you're going to end up what we have when you start putting all this stuff together, just exactly what you have out on Southeast Portland. When you have all this deterioration of all these housing, and which brings in all the crime and brings in all the other stuff into our community. And given what we've gone through the last few weeks, personally, just look at it. Originally, I was going to say just a de minimis. And I was convinced that was probably the way to go with this whole thing. But now I've actually came to the idea of the middle option, which gives us some options. It also gives us options for in the future when more people come in and we have to change things around in 10, 20 years, we're able to do that and do it in a way that benefits all of us.
Mhm. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that. Shannon Knight, you had your hand up.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that I didn't realize that there was a difference in lot coverage on the one part of the chart. So I would be against the increase in the lot, or the increasing of the lot coverage. Again, I could do it in the low or the high density zones, but doing it in like the R5 would concern me. And then as to townhouses, I think I'm okay with. I'll probably stick with the like a 50% max coverage, but I'm okay removing FAR completely.
So townhouses, 50%, no FAR. But you were saying you're against. And Darren, maybe you could speak to this a bit, looking at your table here under for maximum lot coverage. You have 50% for R 4.5, 3, and 2.1, 40% for R5 and R 4.5, and 35% for R10 and R7. Is that? Can you just describe that just a little bit? Kind of.
Absolutely, yeah. So the of course the first column is the zoning. The second column is the existing maximum lot coverage, and then the third column was the proposed max lot coverage. And again, this was based on. So let me walk through it, I guess, and I'll explain it as I go. So R10, R7, not proposing any changes to the max lot coverage because you still have enough space there to design design the project as you see fit. JJ had made the comment earlier about, sometimes you would have to debate whether or not a garage gets included just based on the maximum lot coverage versus trying to maximize your livable space. So once you get down to the R5, with the existing maximum lot coverage, you could cover 2,000 square feet of the property, no matter if it's single family detached residential or if it's a middle housing type. So if you just eliminate the max lot coverage in that zone and just allow you to go to the setbacks of 20 feet front and rear, 5 feet on the sides, you're gaining about 400 square feet. So it's not a huge leap. It's 400 square feet, but that provides the person that's going to develop that project a middle housing project. So this wouldn't be for, again, single family homes, just middle housing. It would allow that extra 400 square feet to maybe add a garage onto the structure instead of not having the garage. So again, yeah, Mr. Gusdorf is on the call, so he might be able to explain it better than I. But then if you go to the R4.5, again, the existing max lot coverage allows 1,800 square feet. If you just eliminate it and go with the setbacks of 20 feet front and rear, 5 on the sides, you gain about 300 additional square feet of flexibility in how you design the site. And again, JJ had made the comment about, garage space. At some point, it gets to the point of making that decision of whether you include a garage or just have people park on their driveway. So, and again, once you get to R3 into R2.1, it doesn't matter because you're just maxed out at 1,200 square feet for R3 and 1,190 square feet for R2.1 based on the setbacks. So the lot coverage is not even necessary in those zones because right now the lot coverage allows a higher lot coverage than what the actual setbacks allow. So it's a moot point. So anyhow, that was the reasoning of why for R5 and R4.5. I put this in here to remove the lot coverage. And again, if the group doesn't want that, that's fine. Just providing that additional flexibility of 300 square feet in the R4.5 and 400 square feet in the R5. So again, I'll stop there and see if anybody has questions.
That's great.
Mr. Gusdorf has a comment.
Actually, Scott had his hands up first, and let's go to Darren.
Oh, I think Darren will connect off of Darren better. So go ahead, Darren.
Thank you, Scott and Darren. Table 17 says a lot, and Darren, I think just to elaborate on what you said, the reason for the lot coverage coming off is you can't. Well, let me back up. By taking that off, those numbers to the right that show your finished footages, that's necessary to achieve that. So, again, you've got your setbacks and boundaries. So your yards are defined by the setbacks alone. You've got a 15-foot, depending on the zone, 20-foot rear yard setback, anywhere from 5 to 7.5 for side yard, and your minimum 15, 20 in the front. Those boundaries will never change. Those setbacks are not being debated or negotiated with. So those yards are still going to be there, and you've always been allowed to build up to that anyway. But I think it's really important to see that by removing the lot coverage on those, it allows you to get to those boundaries. And if you don't do that, it's kind of a progression of obstacles, right? You start with the setbacks, which again are locked in, those don't change. And then you blanket it with lot coverage that pulls you in further. And then you tack on the FAR. Sometimes that even restricts the finished footage even more. And you're exactly right on the size of the structures. If you don't go with option 3 and the R5, R4.5, R3, and R2.1, you won't hit those numbers. 1190 for a single family attached unit is not obtainable. You get into 400, 500 feet, and there's no point to even, they won't get built. So I think I appreciate what Darren's done by showing the omission or deletion of that lot coverage in addition to the adjusted FAR or the elimination of the FAR to get those numbers to a point where you can actually build product that will work, that people will want to live in. I'm going to throw this out there and you guys can strangle me. Is it impossible to discuss a fourth option that might simplify more or less a hybrid of Shannon's and Scott's and Commissioner Pellett's, where I think what I'm hearing, we're all kind of in alignment, at least the people that have spoken on taking the R7, the R10 and leaving that more or less alone. And then really focusing on these higher dense areas. I think makes perfect sense to me, and I agree with that. But maybe to simplify, well, let me ask first: can we entertain a fourth option, or is that not something we should be doing at this stage?
Well, I think there's certainly we could discuss that. I think that's kind of within many of these options, Darren, what you're talking about. So let's go through comments. I want to do a bit of a straw poll just to see where people are at, and then let's come back to that hybrid option, because it sounds like, from what I'm hearing from people, is that would address some concerns with that R7 and that R10. And that's certainly something that, as a recommendation, we could bring forward if there's agreement for that. So
Good.
let's get through comments. Let's get a quick kind of sense where everybody's at, and let's come back to your proposal that you have down. Scott.
Okay, thank you, Alex. So, I just want to say what I said earlier, just to make sure that we don't get caught up in minutia. R10s, R7s, and R5s make up 77% of the number of lots in West Linn. They make up 82% of the land. I really don't think it would be constructive for us to linger on R4.5s, R.3s, or R2.1s. R2.1s are 9%, most likely because they're all townhouses already. So R3s, R4.5s, as far as I'm concerned, we really should not be spending a lot of time talking about those. Let's look at the heart of the legislation. The heart of the legislation gets at the housing problem of the entire Portland metro area. To go off on just a small story here, if I may, is I have family friends, great couple, good hardworking couple, 2 kids in elementary school. They had a small 1,400 square foot ranch. They thought, hey, now's a good time to sell. We'll sell, we'll buy a bigger house. They are renters, have been renters for nearly a year. They have bid on many, many houses. They even busted their budget trying to buy a family-sized home. $900,000. Not enough to get the house. They have lived in West Linn for over a decade. They've been here. Now they're renters here. They would love to be homeowners, but they can't afford it. We cannot take this de minimis position and think everything's going to work out well. The urban growth boundary will get pushed into Stafford. There are higher governmental entities than West Linn. There's the county, there's Metro, there's the state. They can exercise authority beyond what we can do anything to stop. If we block House Bill 2001, then we are saying, go ahead and develop Stafford. Go ahead. I'm going to just stop right there. Thanks.
No, Scott, thank you for that. I think we know where you stand on option 1. I think we know. All right, some of the hands popped up. Vicky and then Kim.
I have a question on the FARs. What is the impact of us removing them?
So from a, go ahead, Darren, do you want to tackle that first, or I can do it? What makes sense to you?
Yep. So this table, hopefully everybody can still see the table. Should I make it bigger or is it fine?
I think we're okay.
There we go. Okay, so so we'll pick we'll pick the R5 zone as an example. So right in the middle there. So with the proposed max FAR, which is the 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth column down at the R5, for the current max lot coverage of that zone would allow you to build a 1,125 square foot unit for a duplex. So you could build two 1,125 square foot duplex units if you were going to do that. Triplex, that would drop down to 750 square feet. Quadplex, that would drop down to that 563. So that's with the current FAR standards. If you went to the moderate option at 60%, that duplex unit would increase from 1,125 to 1,500 square feet, which my math calculator in my brain's not going to work, but I'm guessing that's like 16% or something like that. And then the triplex going from 750 to 1,000, the quadplex going from 563 to 750. So there's a moderate increase in the size of the units that would be attainable if you went from 45%, which exists, to what the moderate proposal of 60% is.
I mean, what's going to be the impact to the community? I mean, I see these numbers, but I don't understand.
Okay, so well, let me finish
Okay.
your original question. So now if we eliminated FAR altogether
Yeah.
in that zone, then the size of the unit would, for a duplex, would go up significantly from 1,500 square feet to 2,400 square feet. And again, that's based on removing the lot coverage for that zone. If we kept the lot coverage standards, it would be 2,000 square feet a unit, because basically you're going to build two duplexes on a 2,000 square foot lot coverage. They typically are two levels, so you're going to max out at 2,000 square feet. And again, triplex, based on no lot coverage, you'd get about 1,600 square feet per unit, and then 1,200 for the quadplex. So again, the lot coverage, so how the structure sits on the lot will not change, whether it's a single family home or a middle housing, unless we increase the lot coverage. So in this case, I was recommending 400 square feet increase. But the FAR is still going to be the controlling factor of how big the building gets. So again, as you can see, going from option 1 to option 2, not really getting that much bigger. Going from option 2 to option 3, there is more of a significant increase in the size of the units. So it would be, as Alex said, the bulk and the massing of the structure.
So Kim, you had your hand up, and I do want to start seeing where we're at on these three options plus the one that Darren suggested. But Kim, did you have a question on this?
Well, I wanted to add to something that's really overarching, super important for our region, and that is preserving prime farmland. Scott hit the nail on the head. And, as we're looking at how we grow, like, does anybody want a 3-story building that takes up a whole lot next to them, blocking their daylight? No, that's not what we're talking about. But if we don't have smart development, we are going to pave over farmland, and we cannot afford to lose the Stafford Hamlet. We cannot afford to lose farmland. You don't get that land back. So I'm a really big advocate of building smart and making sure that people can contain themselves on whatever type of property they have and afford to get in there. Because like you said, nobody can afford to live here. There's $1 million homes going up towards City Hall that have sold out. We need people to have opportunities to raise their families and have a place to call home.
Thank you, Kim. All right. So with that, we have essentially, and Darren, maybe you could stop share so we can see everybody and everybody's at. So we have essentially 3 options in front of us, and I'd like to what I'd like to do for this next exercise is not so much focus on 35 or 40% lot coverage, but I'd like us to focus on kind of the intent of each of these pieces. Ultimately we can work through some of those numbers, but I think what we really want to get to for planning commission is to be able to provide direction on which way we should go for that. And so I want to step through each of these concepts to just gauge where everybody's at and see if there is a place that we can come together to get a recommendation to planning commission. But before that, Charlie, you just raised your hand, so I want to give you a minute.
No, you keep going. I'll wait till later.
All right. Are you sure?
Yes.
You have the floor. Okay. So we have, just as a reminder, we have essentially three options. We have the de minimis option, which is implement the minimum of that to be consistent with HB 2001, which is essentially allow middle housing within all single-family residential zones, provided that the design and development requirements are not more strict than what you have for current single-family housing. That's kind of middle housing in HB 2001, the essence of it. We have a second option, which is to remove FAR for middle housing alone, which would keep the requirements for single family homes, but essentially allow a bit more flexibility for middle housing within single family zones. Scott, getting to, I think, your question or your comment that you had earlier about being able to provide more options, housing options within those areas. We have the other option, which JJ and others have talked about, is essentially removing all FAR requirements within for single family and middle housing. Darren, correct me if I'm misstating that, but that becomes the most flexible of the options for that. Darren, was I characterizing that correctly?
No, so JJ clarified in his email that his proposal was not to remove it for single family detached homes, only for middle housing. So yeah, so that's what's characterized in the table. Yeah, so,
and so is that option
that's
two,
option 3. Yep.
That's option 3. Okay.
Yeah, so it would only apply to plexus, duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes.
Okay. Okay. So Darren, as I step through these, make sure I have them characterized as we're asking this correctly, because I know that table's changed a little bit since we. I want to make sure we're voting on the right pieces. So here's what I'd like to do, and Scott, thank you for the suggestion. We're going to do a little fist to 5 if people have done this before. So since we're on screen, typically if we're around a table, we would just be around a table and we could see each other. But we are virtual, so we're going to use our screens. And so Shannon and Tom and Kim, if you are able to bring yourself back up on video, we'll need to see how you can vote if that's possible. So has anybody done?
I had to go onto my computer, which has no camera. So sorry.
All right. Well, we'll ask you using the audio then. So fist to 5 is essentially as a way to gauge, if you haven't done it before, gauge where people are at in terms of a certain issue, topic, discussion. And it's a way to, not vote essentially yes or no. It's kind of to show degree of acceptance or support. And so when I say fist to 5, when I ask you about each option, here's what I'd like you to do. A fist, so just put your hand up like this. A fist means you absolutely do not agree with this. There is no way this should happen. You can't be any more against it. If you're completely against it or completely for it, then it's 5. So you essentially have 5 degrees of voting power. So if you say 5, this is exactly what I want to do. There's no other way to move forward. This is the way that we have to do that. Now, if you're you're a 3, something like that, 3 plus 4, sorry, math isn't good these days. Fingers don't work quite as well at the end of the day. If you're a 3, it's kind of like you're in the middle. You're not sure. I could go either way. And so what we'll do is we'll step through each of these. And Darren, what I'm going to ask of you is, before we do this, if you could characterize each of those decision points, the 3 decision points, which are the options. We'll see where everybody's at, and then we'll have a discussion at the end about, people for or against or in the middle. Are there ways that we could start to come together on 1, maybe 2 options moving forward? Does that make sense? And then Shannon, we'll just ask you to tell us how many fingers you have up on your screen. All right, so with that, Darren, can you give us a summary of option 1?
All right, thanks, Alex. Yes, so option 1, as Alex said, would still allow the middle housing types in all zones, but there would be no changes to existing lot coverage standards or FAR standards. So the middle housing types would meet the same standards as a single family detached home.
All right. So with that, where is everybody at in the fist to 5 world. So Greg and Charlie at 4, Vicky at 3, 1, 3. Let's maybe go to 4, 4. A couple 3s. Okay. All right. I think I got that.
I'm
So
at a 3, by the way.
you're at a 3, Shannon. Thank you. So we're kind of all over the place on that one, a little bit. So what about? All right. So let's show that just one more time for since we're so all over the place. So option 1.
You can only vote a total of 5 fingers, right?
5 fingers, no toes.
So,
No,
so if you vote 4 here, you only have 1 vote left, right?
Nice try, Charlie. Nice try.
No, isn't it? I'm serious. Can I vote 4 here? Can I vote 4 in the next one?
Yes, you can.
Are you serious?
You can. So this is a way we're just trying to gauge effort. We're just trying to gauge where everybody's at.
Oh, okay. Then I thought I had to save one. Okay, I'm voting 5 on number 1.
All right. Okay. How about let's look at option 2.
All right, so option 2. Oh, did you want me to explain it? Has everyone got it?
Let's review it.
Okay, so I failed to mention option 1 would be the de minimis package as far as FA on lot coverage goes. Option 2 would be the moderate. So in this table, it's showing that there would be an increase to maximum FAR in all of the R10 down to the R2.1 zones from 45% to 60%. And then, and again, I proposed in here that eliminating the lot coverage for R5 and R4.5, but again, that's not extremely necessary, just provide some flexibility. And then eliminating the lot coverage for R3 and R2.1 is a moot point because you can't ever meet that lot coverage anyhow. So yeah, so that would be the moderate proposal.
All right. So where are people at that? Fist of 5, and yes, Charlie, you can put your 5 fingers back up if you want to. All right. So I got a 2, 5, a 5, a 3, 4. Charlie's a definite 1. Shannon, where are you at?
I'm
Shannon,
a 3 again.
3. Okay. All right. I think I got everybody. All right. How about option 3?
Okay, so option 3, again, middle housing types allowed on all of these zones, but it would remove the maximum FAR requirement for just middle housing. So it would bump up from 45% in all these zones to unlimited based on your lot coverage, setbacks, height requirements, essentially. So as you can see in the table, it would bump up the FAR an additional amount from the moderate version.
And now just to clarify, the difference between option 2 and option 3, that addressed all, did option 2 address all housing or just middle housing? Because option 3 is only addressing middle housing. Is that correct?
Both are just middle housing. So
okay, thank you.
The single family detached would remain at the 45% FAR.
Okay, so this one essentially removes the FAR for middle housing.
That's correct.
All right. How are people feeling about this one? 2, 5, 3, 5, 0. Shannon, how about you?
I'll be a 4 on that one.
Alex, are you getting all of these tallies?
Yeah, I think I'm getting, in general, I'm getting them. I think just so looking at this, you know, kind of thinking about that these various elements there isn't a lot of alignment on the group. Kind of just to be clear, you know, I think we have strong support, you know, for I think I think option one, there's kind of middle support. People are okay with it. Charlie, you're very much for it. I saw Greg, I believe you had your hand, you had five as well for that. But in terms of kind of really the extremes, option three feels like we have people on either side of that. Option two feels like in general we have a little bit more support of that, but Charlie, obviously, you know, you feel very strongly against that one and very, very strongly against option three. So I guess the question I want to get to now is that, Charlie, early on when we talked about that option one, which is the de minimis, looking at middle housing flexibility within smaller lots or other lots, and Scott, to your point, most lots are R7 or larger within the city. You know, for you or for others that are looking more towards the de minimis, would there be a modification or a change that would get you to something that more towards that option two, that looks at slightly more flexible standards for middle housing within some zones?
Well, and is it
Jen.
possible to have a fourth option of a combination of those? Because we've talked about removing the FAR for the lower density, the higher density zone, sorry, the R3s, R4s. And having some kind of limitation on the 5s and above.
But I think so. There was some discussion about that earlier on. Like, is there a line that we have more versus less flexibility? I think, you know, Scott, you felt pretty strongly about not having that line. I know Shannon, actually both Shannon Knight and Shannon Ellis, you both talked about that. Shannon Knight, you had raised that earlier. Is that a middle ground for people if we looked at a bar where there was more flexibility versus more standard ways to implement middle housing? Do we start to come to more agreement on what this might be? And again, the goal is to have one proposal to Planning Commission, but it's not, we could have two going forward. Ideally, we'd like to have some alignment to move this forward. What I'm seeing now in our voting is that we're kind of all over the place, and it would be great to be able to move one, maybe two options forward. Darren, you had a question? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you, Alex. You were talking about a line and maybe a compromise. This kind of goes back to the hybrid I was going to propose, and that was the 10 and the 7, the option 2, and then the townhome through R5, the option 3. Just so we're not as extreme on the R7 and the R10. Maybe
So option 2 for R7, R10.
Just throw that out there, let it resonate, see what you guys think.
And option 3, so allowing more. And again, I think the option 3, there's a good point that Darren was making. Setbacks are really going to dictate those smaller lots because there just isn't, they're not that large. So it really comes down to, that R7 and R10 space where there is a little bit more flexibility that we're looking at. Darren, thank you for that. And thank you for proposing that. How do people feel about that? Any discussion? Scott, does that get to some of your concern?
No, I mean, Darren has proposed a good option, which I was kind of thinking about myself, because we want to make housing that people will want to buy, and of course it's all about square footage. Like I said earlier, with these smaller lots, they represent a small percentage of the lots in West Linn, so I don't want to dedicate a lot of time to them. I mean, with option 2, my main sticking point with that was essentially it becomes impractical to build something like a quadplex, even on an R7. I mean, very few people want only 1,000 square feet. And so bare bones idea of option 2 was essentially bump up the likeliness of duplexes and triplexes, which will most likely happen on larger lots without increasing coverage. So that way we don't have a huge amount of density within Westland. So that way we have this balance of maintaining the character of Westland, but also making it so there's more housing. So all the people who want to live here, who may already live here and can't find property to buy, have an option. But if the rest of the group wants to jump behind the idea of doing option 3 on the smaller lots to allow for more family-sized housing, then, you know, I'll stand beside that as well. If it's something that, you know, the majority can get behind, I'll definitely stand with that.
Yeah, and Scott, just as a reminder, for folks, I think early on, maybe the first meeting, we showed some different site calculations, like what you could fit on R7, R10. And Scott, you're absolutely right. You know, a quadplex is difficult on those smaller lots, just because of parking and unit size, those pieces. So I think you're absolutely correct. You know, there's just going to be some site limitations that will dictate to some degree what types of units would be built. And, you know, the larger parcels, you could accommodate potentially more types of units. Lots of hands popping up. Jim, you were first in line.
You know, we're here to figure out what can be more affordable for people. And obviously, as you drive down Solomon, you look at, you know, 950,000 plus for houses. Our house that I live in is double the price it was 12 years ago. And I stop and think where we're looking at the higher density, the 10s and 7s and whatnot with the FARs. If we were to take away the FARs on you're also losing land space around these houses, which people like to have a little bit of land space. Plus, you need to have the sun coming in for your little garden and stuff like this. And I want to be able to push this forward where we can have this type of housing that is affordable for people that they can still live in. So how do you get to that point? Or what are we trying to do here? You know, we're arguing over nickels and dimes. It's I'm just confused, I think. And I think some of the other people has to think, you know, Vicky even mentioned what an FAR is, still trying to figure out how does that going to look? So how does number 1 look? How does number 2 look? How does 3 look? And how does the extra look? And we only got about another 45 minutes to figure this out. So that's where I'd like to get to.
We still have to talk about townhouses. Let's try to set aside a little bit of time for that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Scott. So I think the question, Jim, it's a fair one. You know, I think for FAR, you know, it's really about bulk. As Darren mentioned, setbacks, we aren't proposing changing setbacks there. So those spaces between buildings, with the exception of townhomes, which are shared wall, those wouldn't change. And so it's really about being able to, I think, you know, what Darren's proposal on the table is to be able to provide some flexibility for middle housing on those larger lots, and then acknowledge that those smaller lots are more challenging in some ways to provide middle housing. And so that's where the you know, reducing or removing the FAR for those smaller lots makes more sense. That's I believe Darren's proposal. Other comments, Shannon Loss, and then Charlie, let me get to you after Shannon.
Yeah, I'm kind of struggling with it a little bit. I mean, I work with a lot of clients who are wanting to buy in West Linn, and just a reminder, not everyone is a family, and so not everyone needs the larger sizes. I have a lot of retirees. I have a lot of single people as well. So I'm okay with some of the smaller sizes, but there needs to be a quality. We need to provide more housing, but there also needs to be a quality to it, that it's not so many shoved into a space. And so it's trying to find that balancing act, which was just mentioned. So that's why I'm okay with the smaller lot sizes, removing the FAR. If we had a combination, I could probably be convinced to go to the 60%. I like the 45% for R7 and R10, but if that were a compromise, I would move towards that.
Great. Thank you, Shannon. Charlie, and then let's talk about Darren's proposal. So I do want to get to townhomes. So.
Let's call this a victory. We've managed to take a very large issue to start with, and we've got it down to 3 options. Now, I'm not speaking for the whole planning commission, obviously, but for myself on the planning commission, one of the things that is critical to me is before a legislative hearing, we'll have an opportunity to invite the community, the public in, to testify, to be part of the decision-making process. So what I'd recommend is we take the 3 options. Believe it or not, I think the planning commissioners can actually handle 3 options at one time and move those 3 options, which are a significant focusing of the issues from what the starting was. So it's not like we haven't accomplished anything as a working group. We have. We've got it down to 3 options. And I think we should take those to the planning commission and give them an opportunity to listen to the community as well as to look at the 3 options and then come to a decision, as opposed to trying to focus it in on one thing that apparently from the 5-finger exercise, we're all over the map anyway. So anyhow, that's my suggestion. Take the 3 options, call it a victory, and send it on to the planning commission.
Thank you, Charlie. So just as a clarification, the planning commission could take on any of these pieces again, even if the advisory group decided to recommend one. Doesn't mean that the planning commission couldn't come back.
That's true, but are they going to be presented to the planning commission and to the community as 3 different options? Or is that going to be something that comes up at the planning commission hearing itself? It needs to be part of the agenda starting earlier on so the community knows what the options are.
Fair enough. Thank you. So Scott there, and then I want to come back. We'll poll on that one as well. Scott.
Okay. Thanks, Alex. Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's good to clarify that it's like, whatever vote we make is definitely not finalizing, because yes, there's going to be the planning commission, there's going to be the public hearing, and then it's going to go to the city council. So there's going to be a lot of talk in between now and then. So with that in mind, I think as a group, we should at least send forward what we believe is the best option of the 3. So that way, like I said earlier, it doesn't turn into a thing where planning commission says, okay, you're giving us no guidance, so we'll just roll with what we've got here, and maybe we'll do 1, 2, or 3, or some combination thereof. So this is your chance, as members of this group, to make a solidifying statement regarding which position you think is best as the conversation moves forward.
Thank you, Scott. Kim, you had your hand up.
We have spent collectively way more time than anyone is going to be spending, aside from the planning commission, looking at this. So if we can come to one option to move forward, the public is going to have input on it, but they're not going to do a dive in it like we've been doing. We've been doing a deep dive and we don't have a unanimous thing to move forward. So if we can get closer to consensus, I think that will be a much more successful outcome.
Thank you, Kim. Well, let's do that. I want to say, Charlie, as well. I want to make sure so that you're comfortable with however this moves forward. There are opportunities for opinions other than what maybe a majority opinion is moving forward. So as we develop the recommendation out of this group, we'll also identify that there were other discussions around, bringing all options to the table or, doing something else. So it's not just because we make a decision here, it doesn't mean that all of the conversation goes away. And Darren, am I characterizing that correctly in terms of how we write the findings or summary for this report? We'll identify discussion about other pieces to potentially bring forward to planning commission in addition to a recommendation. Is that fair?
That's correct. Yeah. I'll I'll begin work on that as soon as this meeting ends.
Great.
Because it's due out Friday, so.
So with that, would it be okay with the group? Option 4 sounds like it has, legs, at least in general terms, without, again, the details on specific percentages, I think we can solve for later. But the idea of providing essentially what option 2 would be for some of the larger parcels, R7, R10, to provide, what option 2 provides is, that FAR flexibility, but option 3 for parcels or that are zoned for smaller parcels zoned for more density, go with greater flexibility that's shown in that particular option. Is that, I've heard a lot of discussion about that, Darren, that was your proposal that you put on the table. Is that something we should talk about more in depth and flesh that out? Does that seem like it's something that's reasonable to potentially move forward? Charlie, I know where you're going. So
would it be good to do another fist of 5 just to take the temperature?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So option 4, we're going to call it the Darren option. Option 2 for larger parcels, R7, R10 and larger. Implementing option 3 for smaller parcels, R4.5 to 3 to those smaller units to provide more flexibility on those smaller lots. Did that characterize it correctly, Darren?
And townhomes.
And townhomes.
Yeah.
So let's use your fingers again. So fist of 5 again, 0, you hate it. 5, you love it.
I'll be a 5 on that.
5, 5, 5, 2, 4. Charlie, give me a 1. Greg, give me a 4. Wow. Right, that's great. That's much more aligned on one side. So there was a couple. There was 1, 2, and there was 1, 1. Charlie, you were the 1. I think from a recommendation standpoint, that sounds. I believe you'd still want to bring those 3 options forward to the Planning Commission. There was 1, 2. Who voted 2? Was that? I wrote down numbers. Who voted 2 on with? Jim, I know you were pretty strongly in support of option 2. What are your concerns for this?
Well, I don't see much difference between that and option 2, really. And I have to agree with Charlie that, I have no problem at all, after spending all the years I did on the Planning Commission, that the Planning Commission can't handle 3 options before it and let them make this their decision. And they'll have all the information that we have. I mean, we have worked diligently over the last few months to get to this point. I mean, how long have we been at this? Almost a year. And we're finally there. And to argue, throwing out another option, to me is just spinning our wheels. I just like to see us take it and give the 3 options to the Planning Commission, because now we're off looking at 4 different options to them. And, it's all going to come up in public hearing. It's coming up on this coming Wednesday night. You have the PC work session starting at 4 o'clock on the 4th. And there's going to be a 3-hour session on this anyway. They're going to be working on that. And I think that, it's time that maybe that we did turn this over to them and say, okay, yeah, we're all over the map on this.
Well, so now, Jim, I just want to clarify, looking back at the voting, I think there was pretty strong support for an option 4, majority 4s or 5s as we voted for this. So my thought, and I'd like to check it with the group, and Charlie, I know you have your hand up. I'd like to check it with the group, is that a recommendation that had general support is option 4 moving forward. And that as a part of the report to Planning Commission is that we looked at 3 other options. This was a negotiation for what makes the most sense for this group moving forward. So I think we do have a recommendation out of this group with the caveat that we want to identify that there were 3 other options evaluated as well too. Is that I'm seeing some shaking heads. Is that Is that fair? Charlie, you had your hand up, then Shannon.
Well, I just wanted to point out that we have accomplished a lot. I mean, when we started this thing, if you guys remember all of the different issues, and to get them down to the FAR and is probably the major issue in what zones that it's going to apply to, is a huge success. And I suggest you think long and hard about option 5, which is sending all 3 of them up on an even par, to the extent that after all this work, we managed to get the questions down to something as finite as the FAR issues. So I don't know. I just want to put that out there again. I would have a hard time making this a unanimous vote, to the extent that, or a consensus, let's put it that way, as far as my position is, because I want to keep that flexibility with the community and with the planning commission, that I understand what has gone on and what the options are, but I think we should approach them on equal footing with the planning commission and the community, to give them the chance to talk as if, there are really 3 options on the table and not just one. So that's it for me. Sorry.
And thank you, Charlie. And I think, the characterization of the discussion, we didn't do an up or down vote. So we're not going to yays versus nays. It's really directional for, that, and that's why we're doing this. So I think, Charlie, certainly we can incorporate that discussion, and we'll be in front of you next week to talk about that. But I think, we do want to characterize that there has been a lot of work done with this group, and that there are options there. And certainly Planning Commission can move that, can bring up any one or combination of those in their deliberation. Shannon Knight, you were next on with your hand.
And I was just going to say that a reminder that council did ask us to come to a consensus. So if we're very close to a consensus with this option, that's what we should present, because that's what council asked us to do, is come to a consensus as much as we could. And I think this option incorporates all the concerns that the other options are very all one way or another. This compromise really comes with the concerns that everybody had, which was, changing the characters of the neighborhoods and stuff like that, especially in the zones that we are, mostly have that 70% of the houses. So I think it's a really good compromise.
Great. Thank you, Shannon. Vicky.
Would it be weird to rank? So option 4 might be our number 1 choice, and we have 3 other options. Would it be good to rank these on the proposal when we give them to the planning commission? Like option number 2 was pretty strong too. I mean, does that make sense? So we would give them more information on the data that we have?
I think I'm just kind of looking back at the numbers. I don't know that there's a clear direction on what we provided on options 1, 2, or 3. I think we were, and that's where option 4 came out, is to look at, what I think the sticking points were with those. So Vicky, I would certainly say that we could talk about where people were at in general on those various options, but I'd be careful about saying one was higher than the other, because I don't know that we could actually say that.
Okay, that's good.
Scott.
We only have 28 minutes left, and I think we really need to dive into townhouses.
Let's move it to town. I think we have some direction here, so thank you, Scott.
I thought option 4 included townhouses, though.
Yeah, that's my understanding. So yeah, just so we can clarify, if we're moving forward with option 4, it's option 2 for R10 and R7, and the option 3 for all the other zones and townhomes. That's what I understand, is everyone is agreeing on, outside of Charlie and Jim didn't fully agree with that, but everyone else seemed to have.
Maybe we should take some time to discuss townhomes individually, just so we can add a little bit of a record for the Planning Commission, City Council to be aware of.
Sure. Thank you, Scott. So Darren, do you want to just discuss or kind of come back to where townhomes were for we're looking at option 3 and others, how those fit into the recommendation? Oh, you're on mute. Darren, you're on mute. Shannon, do you have a question still? Just want to capture before we go to townhomes. Oh, okay. Thank you. Nope, no problem. All right, Darren, you're on.
All right, sorry. For some reason, I couldn't unmute myself, but I'll put the content up there again. All right, again, so with the option 4, which we just spoke about, again, they're presented 3 different lot sizes that would primarily see for a townhome. They're generally smaller lots, 1,500, 2,000, and 2,500. So removing the lot coverage in FAR altogether for townhomes would result in a maximum unit size in the 1,500 square foot lot of 1,800 square feet, a 2,000 square foot lot, 2,800 square feet. And again, that's based on a two-story structure covering the entire lot outside of the front, rear, and then side yard transition to the next zone or the street. And then 2,500 square foot would allow up to a 3,500 square foot townhome based on the no lot coverage, no FAR being 2 stories tall.
Does that include the garage?
No, so the FAR would just be the living space. And again, this is the maximum that would be allowed. Whether it could be achievable based on the design of the structure would be a different story, but this is just showing what could happen. So again, there's other options for townhomes that I've shown that would ratchet back that size a little bit if you wanted to go in that direction.
And so to confirm for this, so what really dictates this is the setbacks for townhomes, and I think that's really kind of the key element for townhomes here.
So what are the setbacks again?
It would depend on what zone you're in, Jim. Yeah, so 20 feet front and rear, 15 feet in the smaller zone or the higher density zones, and then the side yard would be 7.5 feet or 5 feet on the outside of the townhome structure. The interior would be attached, and then side street setbacks 15 feet for all zones.
That does not include garages?
The garage would fit into that lot coverage, but not be included in the max FAR or the max unit size that's shown here.
Scott, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. I guess this is looking at this is the reason why I'm more of a fan of option 2 over option 4, is because I don't want to open the gateway so wide for such large townhomes, which on one end, it's like townhomes can be good-sized family homes. But I know people are also very concerned about maintaining the character of Westland and having a high density area with the potential of this, like, for instance, being dropped into an area where it's all single family homes. And then all of a sudden you have this 10,000 square foot lot that's getting divided. I don't know. Is that possible, Darren? Could that actually happen then? And then all of a sudden you've got 4 townhomes right next to you?
Yes, so townhomes would be allowed on R10 lots.
And to step back, so what we had in front of us for option 4 was that was really those smaller parcels from the FAR requirement. So the FAR is still required I believe we said R7 or above. So that's, FAR would still be required within those larger lots to dictate some of the mass. It's the smaller lots where you could see those, you know, where you would have less FAR or fewer FAR requirements. Townhomes are allowed within middle housing though as well too. So, you know, even if they would be permitted regardless within the code.
So could you take a second, Darren, to lay that out for us? So say you got an R10, literally 10,000 square feet, and a developer wants to drop a bunch of townhomes on it. How's that going to play?
So under if we went with the de minimis, right? If they put five units on a 10,000 square foot lot, each unit being 2,000 square feet, they could let's see, they would be able to cover 700 square feet of the 2,000 square foot lot and have a maximum size of a townhome of 900 square feet. If we eliminated the maximum lot coverage requirement, they could cover 1,400 of the 1,400 of the 2,000 square foot lot. And if you went with option 2, which was the 60%, you'd get a 1,200 square foot unit. If you eliminated the FAR altogether, you could go all the way up to a 2,800 square foot unit. Yeah, so you know, 45% I think is like the de minimis, just is not going to work with townhomes. You're gonna have to go a little higher than that with both the lot coverage and the FAR, in my opinion, or you'll be so constricted that you won't really be able to. It won't bear any fruit.
Okay.
And you had your hand up in that, then Vicky.
All right. So just to make sure that I understood you correctly. So if we go with option 4 and it actually, you know, say it plays out all the way through, then a developer could come in, get a 10,000 square foot lot, drop 5 townhomes on them, each of which would be 2,800 square feet. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, that's correct. If you went with that option 4, but you could ratchet back townhomes to, you know, one of these other numbers.
Well, Darren, I want to with option 4, we would maintain FAR, I believe, was maintained in R7 and R10. Is that the option 4? The FAR is only reduced for those smaller parcels, so we would still have. If I noted that correctly, Darren Gustorf, that was what you were proposing as well. Is that right?
That's
Okay,
correct.
so I guess that's a good clarification. So in that case, Scott, to answer your question, then with the option 4 on the table, the option 2 of 60%, then yeah, there would only be a 1,200 square foot townhome built on that lot.
Important distinction there.
Okay, yes, that is. So thanks for clarifying that.
Darren Gustorf.
Hi, thank you. Just one thing to clarify, looking at that table, and looking to kind of get back to what Scott was concerned about these big townhomes, if you take that 25, what this doesn't show is it's the maximum amount of FAR, but it's unachievable with your standard setback. So I quickly drew a little exhibit, which if I showed you, it wouldn't make much sense, but I'll try to explain it. On a 2,500 square foot lot with a townhome with, say it's a middle unit with no side yard, so 0 lot line attached on both sides, you still have a front and a rear yard setback that you can't build in. So I took a 2,500 square foot lot and just said it's 75 feet deep, 33 feet wide, gets us close to 2,500. And then I removed the 15-foot rear yard, 15-foot front yard, just drew a swath, and that pulled out of the buildable area 495 times 2, so almost 1,000 feet of that lot is gone with your setbacks. So what's left, and then you figure a 400 square foot garage, and then if you maximize the lower level and the upper level, I can't get more than 2,610 square feet of living space under option 7 for the 2,500 square foot townhome. So even though FAR allows you to get to 3,500 feet, it's not possible because you still have the restrictions of those setbacks. So don't let those numbers, if you take FAR off on townhomes, don't let those numbers confuse you. It's not possible to build that big. And if I did the math, that's roughly, you know, maybe a 30–40% reduction to what's being shown there. Does that make sense? And Darren, can you confirm that I'm not making stuff up here?
Well,
I don't know. I thought I did the same exercise and I came up with a different number. So,
well, I wanted to go back to Darren at Icon, because, you know, I appreciate you laying out that practical aspect. So in case anyone raises the concerns I raised before, which is that you're saying essentially you're not even inclined to build a townhouse on these smaller houses or on these smaller lots, even with the FARs taken out of consideration. Is that essentially what you're saying?
If the cost to build a structure, I'll back up a little bit. The cost per foot to build, as you guys know, with efficiencies, the smaller you go, the more expensive it costs to build per foot. So there becomes a nexus where if you're trying to build if there's a market for it, a 600 or a 700 square foot townhome, it's extremely expensive to build that when a 850 or 1,000 square foot townhome truly costs almost the same to build. For permits and excavation and the envelope costs, your startup expense on any structure is so significant that it's very expensive to build small. So twofold, it doesn't become economically feasible to build a tiny townhome, and secondly, it's hard to sell. I'm not envisioning mega mansions for townhomes. There's not a market for in my opinion, a 3,500 square foot attached townhome. That's just too massive. The sweet spot for families or not families, two people, you know, you're going to start at 1,000, maybe 900 square feet, and that's where we need to be. So again, and why I was targeting, Scott, your discussion of we have such little small zone areas, it's really moot because it's not really going to come into play. I get that, but when it does, it's important that we allow the flexibility to create something that is still marketable for people that want to afford to purchase an affordable home that isn't. If it's a 600 square foot townhome, it's just not going to get built. It's not going to happen. And just to make it clear, these aren't like 3,500. The bigger the better. That's not how it works. There's no incentive to go that big. The market doesn't warrant that for this type of product.
Right.
So I wanted to go ahead.
To make it so there's a series of townhomes next to each other, so you're saving money with the building on the, you know, actually attaching them.
There's cost efficiencies absolutely for an attached product, you bet. But the cost per unit, like I say, if you take any structure attached or not attached, and the cost swing on a 600 square foot to 1,000 square foot unit is very small. But if there's no market if you can only build 600 feet and there's no market for it, and it costs just as much as 1,000 square foot unit, it just doesn't make sense. It won't happen.
So I want to do a quick time check, and Vicky, you've had your hand up for a while, then I want to get to Greg. It's about 4:45 or 4:47 for those keeping track. I want to confirm, Darren, are we looking for a decision on townhomes, or is this really more of a discussion about how townhomes would be addressed within? We have option 4, which we have general agreement on that townhomes are a part of. Do we need to do anything else for townhomes to recommend a planning commission? Because they are included within HB 2001.
Oh, so as long as the group is comfortable with the option 4 of the townhomes being part of the no FA, part of the option 3 as part of option 4, yeah, then that's all we need.
Okay, thank you. Vicky.
Well, I have a clarification. On this sheet that we have the townhomes, so our option 4, what option is it on this townhome sheet that we're going with, option 3. So option 3 is part of the option 4.
So it will vary by zone. So the smaller zones will have more flexibility with
I'm
because
just talking about the townhouses.
right. So
Okay.
for middle housing in the larger zones are 7 and above.
Okay.
That essentially is option 2.
Okay.
That would include townhomes. The smaller zones are 4.5 and below, I believe, would have more flexibility with FAR so that you could get more units on those lots.
Okay.
And that's more like option 3 for that round, those smaller zones. Let's see. Greg.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I just want to make sure we're clarifying. We went with option 2 on the bigger zones, which means they have a 60%, which means their maximum size would be 1,200 square feet, which if we take Scott's comment on a 10,000 square foot lot, looking at 5 of those, right? You'd be looking at 6,000 square feet of building over that same, is that not right? Over that same 10,000 square foot lot that you would have had before, which just pointing out the math to that, that's a big building since probably the house next door isn't 6,000 square feet, although there are some on that, and I live in one of those neighborhoods. It's not probably likely. So you might want to think about that. You're going to have 6,000 square feet worth of building on a 10,000 square foot lot if you do the townhomes at 2,000 feet a square foot lot. I don't have the sheet in front of me, but I think that's right.
And that's, with HB 2001, townhomes are a part of that. So that could occur even under the de minimis. There is potential for townhomes within those larger lots. What we had looked for is that option 2 provides a little more flexibility on the FAR for those middle housing types. So Greg, you're right. You could have a larger building or series of buildings that are attached within those larger lot areas.
Which might call to mind that you don't want to be at 60% for townhomes. That maybe you only want to be at the current de minimis amount, which is what, 45%.
Well, we have some time to modify if we wanted to look at it. We have 9 minutes. We can look at it. Let's see, Scott, you had your hand up, and then actually then Vicky, I believe. Nope, Scott then.
Okay. Well, just to, I guess, do a pulse check, maybe we should see how people feel about townhouses as far as, if we could do, maybe like, say, on the townhouse list, we do option 2 versus option 5 versus option 7 or something like that, just so we can see where the group's tolerance level is.
Or option 1, where you don't do anything because of the massive size of the building you're going to put on that lot.
Well, if we all lean towards option 2, then clearly when the planning commission and the city council look at it, then, option 1 will definitely be back on the tables for sure.
So, and option 1 could be just for townhomes as well. As long as, getting back to HB 2001, as long as we are not more restrictive within those areas, that we're complying with that. So what I'm hearing, maybe we can take a look at that. Greg, you had your hand up.
Since I do, my preference would be option 1 for only townhomes, nothing else we did today. But option 1, just because of the massive size that you would have there in some 10,000 square foot lot, I think that's what people don't want to see in this town. So that would be a concern.
Okay. Darren Gestorf.
I don't disagree with Greg on the 10,000 square foot lots or even the 7s. Just like we stepped option 2 for the 10 and 7, and then no FAR, which was the option. I'm confused now. 3 for the others, which we did our option 4. I suggest we do the same thing with townhomes. If you do it across townhomes across the board, Greg, then on these 2,500, 2,000, 1,500 square foot lots, you're not going to be able to build anything. So I agree with you on a 10,000, maybe even a 7,000, that you want to vote for option 1 or maybe option 3 and keep that low. That makes sense to me as well, but we're going to get hamstringed on these smaller lots if we don't adjust those.
So I'm hearing an option 4A essentially. So what I'm hearing is that we still like option 4. We would like a little bit more kind of focus on townhomes on those larger lots, to Greg's, your point about having that big building next to it. So that does refine this a little bit. So essentially, using those same, if I'm catching this right, essentially using the same requirements for single family to townhome or whatever within those larger lots, so we don't get the big massing. Is that, Darren Grosdorf and Greg, should we do a quick fist of 5 to see where we're at, or do we have general agreement? Could I get a thumbs up or a thumbs down? Maybe we even go that route to see if we look at. Right. There we go. We didn't have to do fingers. We only needed 1. So the recommendation, what I'm hearing, is we have option 4 with the caveat that townhomes within R7 and larger they have essentially the same design treatments as single family homes on those larger lots. The smaller lots, then we're providing greater flexibility within those areas to be able to construct that. Sounds like we have general agreement on that. Okay, so we have just about 6 minutes left. I want to summarize and we'll talk about next steps. Great job, everybody. We made some decisions today. That's great. So I just explained what I think the general recommendation of this group is that will move through to Planning Commission. Charlie, to your point earlier, we'll want to incorporate a discussion within the direction to the Planning Commission that we also looked at 3 other options and the discussion around that, so that they're aware of that conversation for planning commissioners who are not on this call, so that we have that as an open discussion for them to take up. And then Charlie and Scott, for those of you on the Planning Commission, that'll be your job or your choice to choose how you want to address that moving forward. That seems like a reasonable approach to me. Is everybody generally okay with that approach? And Darren, you're writing the report. Does that make sense to you in terms of how we couch this?
Absolutely. That was the way I was going to write the memo, regardless of the outcome of this meeting. So.
Okay. Scott, you had your hand up.
So how are we going to vote to approve the minutes of this meeting? Because this is our last meeting.
So there's actually, you're actually going to have 4 more meetings, just different topics.
You're not done yet, Scott.
Yeah, we'll cover that in a minute. As soon as we vote here, we got to cover what we're going to be doing next. That's why we're running out of time here, Alex.
No, I think I'm done. I think we have direction unless there's anything else from the group.
So everybody's agreed to what Alex has proposed. We're going to put forward in our recommendations to this Planning Commission. Is that correct? Everybody raise your hand if that is correct. Okay, we're good to go. Okay, we have gotten kind of discombobulated with whatever we were doing here. Coming up in our next meeting, we're going to be starting on the Chapter 96 revision on the roads. And so are we going to put out just a flyer just on the 96 so everybody has that, Darren, so that they know what we're talking about?
Yes, that's correct, Jim. So Chapter 96 of the Community Development Code deals with when street improvement construction is required as part of a single lot development. So for instance, if it's an empty lot, you buy it, you want to build a single family home on the property. It deals with whether that triggers the requirement to build out street improvements. Accessory dwelling units are included, expansion of a commercial structure, change of use of a commercial structure. So those are the types of changes to a piece of property that are captured under Chapter 96. So we will bring you a proposal for your next meeting. Again, we'll get it out to you a week in advance, and we'll have an explanation of everything. We'll have the existing language, what we're proposing, and the reasons why we're proposing it, and then walk through it with you, just like we did House Bill 2001. So the good thing about Chapter 96 is it's 1 page. So it's not 300 some pages that you're going to have to look through. It's 1 page. We have 2 meetings to get through it. So the first meeting in May, we'll hopefully be able to get everyone acclimated to what we're talking about and try to work towards some agreement on some things, and then come back to the second meeting and work through a final recommendation like we did today. So we have confidence that it will go pretty smoothly.
Okay, did we have on next Wednesday again at 6 o'clock or 6:30? What time? I think does it start with the Planning Commission? 6:30.
Okay, yes, thanks. That's a good reminder, Jim. So the next step of House Bill 2001 will be a work session with the Planning Commission next Wednesday, May the 4th, starting at 6 p.m. It's open for your participation. Then there will be a public hearing with the Planning Commission on May the 18th, which will begin at 6:30. And again, I can put this in an email to the group where public testimony can be taken, at which point the Planning Commission will make its recommendation to the City Council. The City Council will hold a work session on June the 6th at 6 p.m. and at a public hearing on June the 13th at 6 p.m. To get an adopted code amendment package in order for us to meet our deadline of June 30th to have the code in place to comply with House Bill 2001. So a lot more activity over the next about 6 weeks on this project.
And so on the 25th is our next meeting, on the 25th of May.
That's correct. 25th of May, we'll start in on Chapter 96. We'll get the materials out to you a week in advance as we have promised in the meeting guidelines. And that's it for logistics, I believe.
Well, and this will be my last meeting with this group because I'm focused on House Bill 2001. I just want to appreciate everybody's time on this. And Jim, thank you for chairing this group. I know you're continuing after me, but I just want to thank you for this. These are tough topics, and I really appreciate everybody, the effort folks put in. And we have definitely more to go with Planning Commission and City Council, but we got through a lot over the last few meetings, and just want to thank you for the efforts because I know it's complicated and contentious as well. So appreciate it.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, thanks to Alex and Sue for their work on this project.
Thank you guys for everybody, because even though it was a confusing situation at times trying to understand everything, we did it. So
We did it. We got there.
We got there. We all deserve our put out even hand, even Charlie.
all 10 fingers, Charlie. All 10 fingers. So
See you all on 25th or sooner.